Pilate's house. And part of the preparation for the Passover was to do a diligent search of your house and remove all the leaven from your house. That's still part of the Passover preparation for Jews who are observant, by the way, and part of the joy of it for most families. But in any event, to go into the house would have been to do that, and then they'd have been ceremonial unclean. So Pilate came out to them, like outside of his palace, and says, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" They say insolently, snottily, "If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate says dismissively, "Oh, brother, these people I have to govern. Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. It's early in the morning. I'm doing my administrative duties." Roman authorities got up early, got all their paperwork and crud done by the early morning. That was the way they did stuff. He's busy. Don't judge him yourself. "But we have no right to execute anyone," the Jews objected. This happened so that the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the type of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Here's the point. If in the end we're going to find out that the bottom line charge against Jesus is that he's a false prophet, and that he's a blasphemer. He claims to be God. Well, what is the punishment for blasphemy or being a false prophet?
Death.
Pardon? Not banishment.
Death.
Death by how? Stoning. But what has Jesus said about how he is going to draw all people to himself? John 12. "If I be lifted up." So John says, "But we have no right to execute anyone." The Romans executed bad criminals by crucifixion. Jesus has already predicted that he will be lifted up, and that's how we will draw everybody to himself. The Jewish leaders intended to shame Jesus and ruin his support in a humiliating, horrible death. But Jesus knows that when he is lifted up, that's what will be the magnet. In some opposite, contrary to intuition way, there is something magnetizing about the cross. There is something in the death of Jesus that points us to hope. Not Pollyanna stuff that won't stand up to the rottenness of real human life. But hope in the sense of, all right, do your worst. And we'll see who has the last word. Do your worst. Can God take your worst? Yes. How much does God love us? This much. How terrible is sin? This terrible. There is something about this death that becomes the magnet, even though it's a scandal and an offense. This happened, John tells us, so that the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Pilate went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Where'd that question come from? Jews. Maybe from Judas. It came from the Sanhedrin, from the meeting that we haven't been told about by John. He's already been told. He's conducting a trial. He knows what the charge is. This guy claims to be the king of the Jews. He goes back in and says to Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus begins to conduct a trial of Pilate. And starts saying, "Is that your own idea? Or did others talk to you about me?" Jesus knows the answer. Pilate is the governor. Am I a Jew? You is implied in that. I'm a Roman. He's a minor noble, by the way. Am I a Jew? Pilate replied, "It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Notice now we have a little conversation from Jesus that's kind of like Nicodemus' conversation with Jesus. Jesus kind of shifts the field. What is it you have done? Jesus, in a sense, does not answer. He says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews, but now my kingdom is from another place. My kingdom is not of." Do you hear the word "of"? This is an issue of origins. What is the origin of Jesus' kingdom? Pardon?
Eternity.
Yeah, eternity. He's the eternal Son. His origins are in eternity. His origins are in the creation. His origins aren't in Rome. His origins aren't in a popular uprising and, 100, zealots who will come and storm the palace for him. His origins of kingship are in his being the eternal Word become flesh. This is a question of origins. Remember, Jesus said to Nicodemus, Nicodemus, what's wrong with you is your origins. Your origins are in you and your authority and your tradition. You can't get to heaven from there. You can't get right with God on your own hook. You need a new birth. You have to be born again, born from above. Jesus' origins are from eternity, and therefore his kingdom is. You see, that's the question of origins. The reason Jesus is the truth is that he is the eternal Son. The reason Jesus is the truth is that everything that was made through him, John tells us in chapter 1. Right? That's the issue. Pilate says, you are a king then. If it's true that Jesus is a king, he's guilty of rebellion against Caesar and against Pilate. Jesus answered, you are right in saying I am a king. Actually, the Greek is, you have said so. You have said so. I'll tell you what that means in a minute. In fact, for this reason I was born, for this reason I came into the world, to testify that of the truth, everyone who is of the truth listens to me. That's the Greek. Jesus does not quite say you are right. He said, you have said so. Those are your words, Pilate. He doesn't deny that he's a king, but him being a king isn't the point to Jesus. His kingdom has an origin in heaven. He is king here, but not in competition with Caesar the way Caesar thinks, with armies and taxes. The issue for Jesus is that he is truth. He is the truth about everybody, about everything, about the cosmos. He is the truth about Pilate and the religious leaders. So Jesus says, you've said that I'm a king. In fact, for this reason I was born and came into the world to testify to the truth. Let's change the conversation from the accusation against me, which is baloney anyway, because they're not really mad at me because I claim to be a king. He never claimed to be king like that. He claimed to be Messiah. He came to be truth. Everyone who is of the truth, everyone who belongs to the truth, obeys me, listens and obeys. Pilate says, and man, has there ever been a moment in human history when this was not the question? What is truth? What is truth? What is truth? Can it be known? That issue is more alive in this century than it has been in any century, I do think. But it was alive for the Greeks. That's what Plato and all those boys were really wrestling with. What is truth and how do you know? And it was alive in the whole Enlightenment project. From the late 1400s on. That was the job. How do we know what's true about the nature of the universe? What is truth? With this, he went out again to the Jews and said, I find no basis for a charge of him being king. I find no basis for a political charge against him. So now Pilate begins looking for ways to release Jesus. But he wants to do it in a way that does not put him at odds with the religious leaders. It's a losing game. It's a little bit like telling your kid you're going to put him on restriction and asking him for his permission to put him on restriction. What sensible kid ever gave you permission to punish him? So he starts to look for a way to release Jesus and to react actually to the truth, or without having to cross the religious leaders. I find no basis for a charge against him, but it's your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? He kind of thinks maybe he will appeal to their patriotism. They shouted back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas, a robber, a thief, a rebellious leader. Barabbas means son of the father. And it's his last name, like Bar Jonah, Simon Bar Jonah, Peter, son of Jonah.